We're down here at Lagg Distillery on the south end of the Isle of Arran. Historically, the south end of Arran was famous for its both illicit and illicit distilling. Illicit distilling obviously being the lifeblood of the local farmers here for hundreds of years. And back in the 1830s, it was the site of the very last illicit distillery on the Isle of Arran before Lochranza came to be in 1995. Because the area's rich history in previous distilling, we thought it was the perfect place for us to build our brand new distillery, focused on heavily peated malt rather than non-peated malt. So back in 2017, the ground was purchased and we started the groundworks, foundation, everything from that date onwards. The first things built on site though were the 3 brand new warehouses for the company. These were not just for the current distillery Lagg, but it was for the previous distillery Lochranza, because Lochranza had almost run out of space. So the 3 warehouses were erected on site before the actual distillery was even built. And then the distillery came shortly afterwards. 2019, the doors were finally opened for production, and we actually produced our very first spirit on site at 14:35 on 19th of March 2019, and we've been constantly on the go since then. Aside from the distillery, we actually had quite a lot of acreage to use when we bought the site. We also acquired ourselves an orchard. We recently planted up to 3,000 trees, and we're very excited to use them for the future along with the Lagg product. We're definitely going to produce a cider and maybe move on to some kind of apple gin or apple brandy from there. The site is also next to local barley fields owned by local farmers, and they will be supplying us with the barley over the next few years so that we can produce 100% Arran spirit. From the get-go, the actual building was designed in such a way so to not just focus on one aspect of the distillery. Most distilleries are quite old buildings that focus mostly just on production and just had visitor centres added on top. But Lagg Distillery was actually designed so that both visitor centre and distillery would have equal footing and be almost married together. So that's why it's like a seamless build from one end to the next. The distillery doesn't seem to stop. The main difference between Lagg Distillery and our sister distillery Lochranza is that we focus on heavily peated malt. Lochranza traditionally is an unpeated distillery, but for 1 month of the year for the last 10 years they've been producing low peated and heavily peated malt for what's known as the Macquarie Moor range. We've kind of taken that responsibility from our sister distillery to allow them to focus on non-peated, while we will focus on the heavily peated side of the malt industry. Lagg Distillery goes through 4 tonnes of malted barley a day. We have a 4-tonne semi-lauter mash tun, and from the 4 tonnes we produce 20,000 litres of wort, which then becomes wash after 75 kilograms of yeast are added. From that 20,000 litres of wash, we prefer 72 hours minimum fermentation. It can go slightly longer, but 72 is our gold standard. We don't want to go any less than that. So those 20,000 litres of wash are then distilled over a 16-hour period inside our wash still. Our wash still is a very large bulbous onion shape, and that's what gives us the specific characteristic we're looking for at Lagg. It means slightly less copper contact, and this vapour doesn't have to fight too hard to get up over the swan neck and be recondensed. So that gives us the very heavy characters we're looking for. Our spirit still is slightly different in shape from our wash still. It's 7,000 litres, so slightly smaller. And it also has a distinctive lamp glass shape built into it. This allows for slightly more copper contact to try and balance out the very heavy vapours we're going to be getting from the wash still. It does help emphasise that grassy character we're looking for. We allow people to own private casks of Lagg. We have a system called the Lagg Cask Society where we allow 700 barrels to be purchased for private owners. And these are all stored inside Lagg Warehouse 1 in a specified racking system. About 95% of all the barrels that we use at Lagg are ex-bourbon barrels, first fills. The rest are either second fills from Lochranza, usually ones from the previous singles cuts, or sherry, some quarter casks, and a few wine casks as well. What we have here is the Lagg 1-year-old spirit. I say 1, it's actually closer to 16 months. It was cast back in April last year, 2019, and I don't know how much you can see of it, but it's actually got a good little bit of colour. It is only 1 year old, but I have tried 1-year-old spirit before in my time. I've smelled plenty as well, but I can tell you, this is something special. It's not as spirity as you might imagine. There's a lot going on there. The bourbon influence of the Buffalo Trace that we've been using for the first few fills that we did, they've definitely impacted a lot of that flavour into the spirit. It's light toffee notes, very, very, very light. Still quite spirity, but it's not overpowering. You're not getting that massive knockback you would if you stuck your head, say, in the safe. But taste, though, is really what defines it. If I was to give this a blind taste test to anyone and asked how old it was, I've done it a few times, not a single person has even come as low as 3-year-old. Everyone always assumed it's immediately a whiskey. The impact that these barrels have had on this spirit has been phenomenal. Just that slight wee taste there, I'm getting a massive influx of kind of whiskey fudge, kind of a very light, peated tablet flavour almost. Very, 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 it is there, it's not massive, but it is there. And it's very, very exciting. It just shows what's going to happen in the future. We've got a lot to look forward to, and I cannot wait until this officially becomes a whiskey. Back in 2011, Lagg experimented with a lot of heavily peated malt. They were usually focusing on the lower side at the time for the Macquarie Moors, and I guess for the future they were thinking we need to try something different. So very fortunately, Lagg Distillery has been gifted these heavily peated whiskies made from 2011 onwards, and they've become our Finglas Cut Macquarie Moor range, which we sell down here at Lagg. Now, this is the quarter cask. As you can see, nice and light. It's your standard quarter cask, very, 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 very light, but so many delicate notes. You get that blast of citrus, which is very, very apparent with Lagg, but it's so fresh. The smoothness is palpable, just an explosion of butterscotch and toffee. Absolutely delicate, beautiful, beautiful notes. On the other side of the Finglas Cut spectrum, we have the cherry, which is cask strength, and as you can clearly see from the colour of the glass, very, very dark, very, very rich. This is like the quarter cask. It was heavily peated, given to us from Lagg, filled back in 2011, and I can just say it's a beautiful, beautiful rich dram. You get that really blast of dark chocolate and fruit. It's really overcame. It's almost Christmassy, but not quite. You know, I've got a real affinity for peated sherry, and this is always my drama take home with me. It's one of my favourites. That beautiful, heavy, rich flavour, and the smoke the smoke and the peat just really emphasise what the casks have done with the spirit. They've really brought that flavour through. Here's a virtual distillery tour we created this year, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Welcome to Lagg Distillery. Here we are outside the visitor centre and the Whisky Still House. We are situated 18 miles southwest of the main ferry terminal in Brodick, and if you're travelling from Lagg, we are 49 miles south. We have views of Ailsa Craig and the Firth of Clyde, and on a really good day you can see right across to Northern Ireland. Historically, the south end of the island had the biggest culture of making whisky here on Arran. Whisky smuggling and illicit distilling was a big part of Arran life for locals. However, after many run-ins with customs and excise, they decided to bring in military men to help sort out the problem. And so the last legal distillery on the Isle of Arran was called Lagg. And now we need to make sure that our water is good. And thankfully, yes it was. It's pure, it's natural, and it comes into our site underground. And the water's pumped into the distillery where it's filtered and it's ready to use for all our wonderful whisky making process. Cheers!
I'm standing in one of the two barley fields located behind Lagg Distillery. Isle of Arran Distillers is dedicated to creating a quality product, and we don't compromise on our ingredients. All of the barley used here at Lagg is coming from the northeast of Scotland. It's been malted for us at Burt Malts in Montrose to our specific requirements of approximately 50 phenol parts per million. The peat that's being used in the kiln is coming from near St Fergus in Aberdeenshire, making it a Highland peat and giving it floral notes such as heather and moss. Although traditionally the west coast of Scotland isn't known for its barley production for the whisky industry, the two fields here at Lagg are allocated for Isle of Arran distillers. For at least a couple of weeks of the year, 100% Arran barley will be flowing through our stills. We can't wait to taste the whisky when it's matured.
Hello there, and welcome to the start of the tour here at Lagg Distillery. You join me here at the Wall of Fame, where all our cask owners are celebrated as part of our family here, helping to establish the legacy that Lagg Distillery will become on the Isle of Arran. There are many advantages to being part of the Cask Society, the greatest one of all, which is one of the very first bottles from our first fill cask, which is currently residing in our warehouse. We do hope that you come to join us here at the Lagg Distillery very soon, and I look forward to raising a glass with you then.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or wherever you might be. My name's Anthony. I'm going to take you through the process involving the mash tun. The start of really the process inside the production room here at Lagg. So I'll take you through what you can see before we talk you through the process itself. So just behind Graham there, who's filming me, we've got our 3 hot water tanks. Just to my right you can see the mash tun here, the main part of the process. Up above towards the ceiling there we've got our grist hopper, so we store 4 tons of grist in that. Down below, as we're on the first floor here, on the ground floor, we have our mill where we mill the barley. And through the walls there, you can't see it, but we have 2 20-ton silos, and that's where we store our barley. The barley is fed through on a conveyor system and goes into our mill, as I say, just on the ground floor there. It's then fed up into the hopper, and that gives us 4 tons of grist. And we always mill 4 tons a day, and we do that 5 days a week, so about 20 tons a week that we're milling. Our grist on a morning comes down through the hopper, and at a pipe at the back of the mash tun, just out of sight here, that's where we mix it with the first water that goes in, 17,000 litres of water, 4 tons of grist, and that water is about 67 degrees, and we cool it down slightly to achieve an overall temperature between 63.5 and 64.5 degrees centigrade inside the mash tun. That's an ideal temperature for extracting the maximum amount of sugar. So our mash, so our 4 tons of grist and 17,000 litres of hot water will sit in there for about an hour, gently seeping away, and we're extracting a lot of sugar and wort at that point. And incidentally, that's what we're extracting here. That's the cloudy wort that helps us with our flavour profile and sugar extraction. So we extract a cloudy wort here at Lagg. As I say, that will sit there for about an hour before we open the underback, which is again just behind, just out of shot here, and then we can begin our transfer process. Okay, so once we've started the transfer, after about 13,000 litres, it's time for our second water, which is about 6,000 litres. It can be more or less depending on how much we put in for the first water. And we'll heat that up to 78 degrees centigrade. So we go up the way with the temperature, and that rinses through the bed of grist there, the bed of grain, and we extract more sugars and also rinse more of the sugar out that we've got. As I say, we send that across to the washback there. So we've 1 more water to put in, that's the third water, and this time we go up again in temperature. We take it right up to 97 degrees, and we put about 14,000 litres on this time. Now the second and third waters are both sparged on, so that's just a shower system that sprinkles the water onto the grain, and this just washes the rest of the sugars through, which we then transfer via the underback into the washback. So the third water that we put on, let's say 14,000 litres, we don't transfer that across to the washback, we only transfer 20,000 litres across. So the third water, in essence what we're doing is rinsing the last small amounts of sugar from the grain, and what we do, we don't waste that. It's too weak to go on further down the production line, but we don't waste it. We pump that back into tank number 1, and that then becomes our first water for the following day's production cycle, so we retain as much sugar as we possibly can.
These are our washbacks. Washbacks are giant buckets basically. They're used to ferment, wort and produce alcohol. We've got 4 of them, and they're made of Oregon pine from Vancouver Island, and the reason we use traditional wooden style washbacks is that they help regulate the temperature of the liquid inside, and they also The flora that lives inside a wooden washback helps impart a little bit of extra flavour to the final product we make. They all hold 25,000 litres of liquid, but we only fill them to 20,000 litres because this is where the yeast is added, and we need to leave a bit of extra space at the top for the yeast to do its business. So in this washback we've got this morning's fresh batch of wort taken from the mash tun, and we have added the yeast. And what the yeast is doing, well, it's a fungus, and it basically converts sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. And this is called fermentation. The contents of this washback have been fermenting for 1 day. And you can see the bubbles, the agitation. You won't be able to smell, but I can, the massive aromas coming off, the carbon dioxide, and the hundreds of other chemicals the yeast is producing as well as alcohol. We call these congeners in the industry, and they're what gives whisky its unique flavours and character. In this washback we have the finished product of this stage. It's called Wash. It is a strong beer that doesn't taste very much like beer. It's 8% alcohol. And the cloudy style of wort we produce here, interacting with our yeast, will create a lot of rich, heavy, earthy congeners. It's designed to accentuate the peatiness of the whisky we will produce.
Here at Lagg we have 2 stills. One wash still 10,000 litres and one spirit still, which has got 7,500 litres in it. These stills run for approximately 7 hours per shift. We have a bulbous wash still, and we have a lamp glass spirit still. The bulbous wash still basically designed to allow the heavy vapours to get across the line arm and quickly down into the safe, where we're trying to collect most of these heavy vapours for our spirit. Whereas if you look at the spirit still is more lamp glass shaped, and what we're trying to achieve in here is to get all these heavy vapours across as quick as possible without using the reflux that most people use in the industry. Within here we're running the spirit approximately 10 to 11 litres per minute. Unlike our sister distillery up in Lagg, they run about 6 to 7 litres a minute, which gives them a more Eastery flavour, which is a lighter spirit than what we have. Down at Lagg here, we're looking for a more heavy peated spirit, which is more on the dark side. The still design is the most important factor when looking for the spirit characteristics. Reflux is where the alcohol turns to vapour and recondenses inside the still. This usually happens when the volatile vapours contact the cold copper further up the neck. If we were to run this still 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, we would be producing approximately 1 million litres of pure alcohol.
Hello, here we are in Lagg's first warehouse number 1, where we have all of our filling equipment. We fill many different casks in here. We fill about 63 each week on average. We also fill sherry hogsheads, sherry butts, wine casks, rum casks, and anything else we can fill. We also have the only racking system at Lagg here, which is where all of the Lagg Cask Society barrels are kept, for all of you that have bought one. That also ties in, we have one of the most valuable casks here, which is cask number 1, which is stored way up at the back, which is for the Lagg Cask Society members again. In 10 years it will come out as a whiskey in which you will all get your own bottle if you are part of the society. We then also have our warehouse 2 and 3, which are designated for bulk spirit, which is the spirit that becomes the whiskies we love. We also have 3 new warehouses in plan for Lagg, because we have so much whiskey we need more space to hold it. On top of that development we have 3,000 apple trees, which will hopefully one day, or will one day, give us apples in order to make Lagg cider, which will eventually be turned into brandy, which will hopefully be very nice.